Hello students, welcome back. This is Dr. Sagar Gore and we study biology here. So in last some lectures we have completed up to the bryophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms also. And today what we are going to study is very important topic, and that is life cycle in plants. Life cycle in plants, also known as alternation of generation. Alternation of generation. Okay, so life cycle in plants or alternation of generation. Every plant has a cycle in its life, throughout the life, and it is also known as alternation of generation. So there are life cycles or generations. If we see, then life cycle or alternation is in the form of sporophyte and gametophyte. These are the two forms in which this plant cycle always takes place. Or it is also said to be generation. One of the generation is sporophytic and another generation is gametophytic. So plant always have two stages. One of them is sporophyte, another one is gametophyte. So see the general agenda or general theme, general concept, that how we can see the alternation of generation in the plants. So common dogma, we can say, the common theme is like this. So common theme we have to study first. In this common theme, we can see that one of the generation or the stage is sporophytic. And another one stage that and generation is gametophytic. Gametophytic generation. So sporophytic or gametophytic. So see, this sporophytic generation is always diploid. This is very important because this generation, alternation of generation or this life cycle is quite complicated to understand. Easily we can't understand it, so carefully watch this video and carefully try to understand this. This sporophytic generation is always diploid, whereas this gametophytic generation, it is always haploid. Okay, so these are very important stages while studying the alternation of generation. This sporophytic generation always forms something, and that is known as spores. These are spores. Whereas this gametophytic generation or gametophyte, it produces gametes. So spores and gametes, these are produced. Though this sporophytic generation is diploid, these spores are always haploid. Always haploid. And these gametes are also always haploid. But the important thing is that you should note this, that gametes and spores are not same or equal. They are not same, means they are different. So again, this sporophytic generation is again diploid, always diploid. This gametophytic generation is always haploid. Okay, so keep in mind that gametes and spores are not equal, though they are haploid. Their ploidy level is always haploid, but they are not same, they are not equal. Okay, so this is note that should keep in mind. So after producing spores by sporophyte, after production of gametes from gametophytic generation or gametophytes, what happened? These gametes produce two types of gametes. One of them is male gamete and another one is female gamete. After the formation of these gametes fuse, and this is called as fertilization. Fertilization. After fertilization of these gametes, they form, and that is said to be zygote. And again this zygote forms sporophyte. This is the central dogma, and again these spores form gametophyte. This is very important. One thing is that whenever spores are formed from the sporophyte, the process that takes place in between here is meiosis. Meiosis is also said to be reductional division, RD. Whereas, when we know gametophyte are always haploid, it means if we do here or we carry out here meiosis, so we can't reduce the number of these haploid gametophyte because they are already haploid. That's why what division takes place here is equational division. ED is equational division, or we can say mitotic division or mitosis. This is very important. Mitosis or equational division takes place after gametophytic generation, because we can't do, in case of gametes, we can't write n by 2. Okay, so this is a central dogma. Once more, take a review. See, there are always two generations in the life cycle of a plant. One of them is sporophytic, that is sporophyte, it is always diploid. Then next one is the gametophytic generation, which is always haploid. This gametophytic generation, with the help of meiosis, forms the spores, which are haploid, and gametophytes with the help of mitosis forms the gametes, which are also haploid. But these gametes and spores are not same. Okay. Next, these gametes are formed in they may be male or female gametes. When they meet to each other, they form, after fusion, they form fertilization. So here is the process of fusion. They form fertilization, and after all, they form zygote. Zygote again develops into sporophytic generation. So this is the alternation of generation from sporophyte to gametophyte, from gametophyte to sporophyte, again from sporophyte to gametophyte, and gametophytes to sporophyte. So this cycle always go on. That's why it is said to be alternation of generation. So in every plant we have to study this process only, and this is the central theme or common theme for all. Now this alternation of generation is of three types. So these three types are as following. Three types are haplontic life cycle, diplontic life cycle, and last one is haplodiplontic life cycle. Haplodiplontic life cycle. We have to understand these three. Let's see haplontic life cycle. What does haplontic life cycle means? Haplontic life cycle means haploid, this phase will be dominant. Haploid spore will be, or haploid stage will be dominant. Which one is the haploid stage? So here we can say gametophytic generation. Gametophytic generation will be dominant, and it will be for longer period. Let's see how. In case of this haplontic life cycle, this sporophytic generation is in the form of zygote. So zygote is in the form of sporophytic generation. This sporophytic generation will form spores, and the process that we take in between is meiosis. That is reductional division, means number of, from this 2n it will get reduced to n. So spores got formed. After the formation of these spores, here will be gametophyte, and this gametophyte it is again haploid. This gametophyte will form two types of gametes, male gametes and female gametes. After fusion, here will be fertilization, and they will form again the zygote. So in this case, it means haploid stage is dominant, because diploid stage is it persists for this much time only. So maximum time or maximum period or in life cycle of these plants, the haploid stage is for the longer period. That's why this is said to be haplontic life cycle. So you have to understand this sporophytic generation is limited up to zygote only. Zygote is in the form of sporophytic generation. It takes place in the haplontic life cycle. What are the examples of this haplontic life cycle? So examples are very important. So haplontic life cycle in this group, so examples are, the trick is very simple, classica SUV. Classica SUV. Very simple. C means Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas. Again C means Chara or Cara. Then S means Eulothrix. S means Spirogyra. And V means Volvox. Very simple. This is about the haplontic life cycle. See, once more we will take a review. In haplontic life cycle, it is in a haploid stage, means haploid stage is dominant. Then, how does it take place? When haploid stage is dominant, it means it persists for a longer period. So, continuing from after the formation of the sporophyte, after formation of the zygote, it grows into gametophyte, and gametophyte again fertilization forms zygote. So, this haplontic life cycle persists only up to certain period or very little or small period. That's why it is said to be haplontic life cycle, because in overall life cycle plant goes through the haploid stages. So maximum time it is in the haploid stage. That's why it is said to be haplontic life cycle. Okay, and the examples are CCSUV, the classic car SUV. SUV is the car name. Chlamydomonas, Chara, Cara, Eulothrix, Spirogyra and Volvox are some of the examples of haplontic life cycle. So let's move to the diplontic life cycle. Likewise, what will be the stages? Diplontic life cycle. In case of diplontic life cycle, so 2N, that is diploid stage, will be dominant. We can see here that in case of diplontic, which stage is diplontic? The sporophytic stage is diplontic. Sporophytic generation is dominant. Sporophytic stage is dominant. See how? When we see that there is a formation of zygote and zygote further forms sporophyte. Very simple. Sporophyte. This sporophyte is diploid. This sporophyte further forms spores. These spores, and the process that takes place here is meiosis. With the help of meiosis, this sporophyte forms spores. These spores are haploid. These haploid spores further forms gametophyte. This gametophyte is always haploid. After this gametophyte, this forms two types of gametes. So here is the gametes. Gametes will be male gametes or female gametes. So this is formed with the help of mitosis, and these gametes are again haploid, and further after fusion they form zygote. In this case, this gametophytic generation, or we can say diplontic life cycle, is dominant. It means this gametophytic generation is always dependent on sporophytic generation. This gametophyte, this generation is very small, short and very few celled. So it is for very few minutes. That's why this cycle remains for this much time only, and that's why it is said to be diplontic life cycle. The examples of this diplontic life cycle is angiosperms, gymnosperms, and some of the fucus. These brown algae are the examples of this diplontic life cycle. What we have to understand, let's take a review. In diplontic life cycle, the sporophytic, that is diploid phase, is dominant. Diploid phase is dominant over haploid phase. Okay. So here this zygote forms sporophyte. Sporophyte results into, and they form spores. Spores results into gametophyte. This gametophytic stage, it is very small, short, and very few cells. It remains for very short period. That's why they form gametes, and again it forms zygote, and this diplontic life cycle goes on. Very simple. Now, third one is the haplodiplontic life cycle. It is the third one, haplodiplontic. Third one is haplodiplontic life cycle. Haplodiplontic means as much the haploid stage will be dominant, equally the diploid stage will be dominant. Haploid stage equal to diploid stage. So 50-50, or here is the 60-40 ratio. 60:40 ratio. This is very important. See, if there is a sporophyte, this sporophyte is diploid and this will form spores. These spores will be haploid. These spores further, it forms gametophyte. These gametophytes are haploid. These gametophytes will form two types of gametes, and they are female gamete and female gamete. They will fuse and form. After fertilization, they form zygote, and this zygote again forms sporophyte. In this case, see, these gametes are again haploid. So in this case, diploid sporophyte and haploid gametophyte, they are dependent on each other. Very important that they are dependent on each other. Very important. See how. In case of, so I will write over here. In case of bryophytes, these bryophytes, the stage gametophytic. Gametophyte is dominant. D means dominant. It means this gametophyte is again always haploid. Okay. So this gametophyte, it is always dependent on this sporophytes. Sorry, it is dependent. It is diploid or it is dominant. It means sporophytic is dependent on a gametophyte. And in case of pteridophytes, the sporophyte is dominant. And this sporophytic generation in pteridophytes, this sporophyte is said to be prothallus. It is very important. Prothallus. This prothallus is always dominant, and that's why all this sporophytic generation, this gametophytic generation, it is dependent on this sporophytic generation in case of bryophytes. So examples are same. If we see the examples of this haplodiplontic life cycle, they are bryophytes, then pteridophytes, brown algae, green algae, and red algae. All these are the examples of haplodiplontic life cycle. So let's take a review. In the case of haplodiplontic life cycle, always haploid, as much important the haploid stage is there, same will be the diploid stage, and the ratio is 60:40. So whatever stage will be dominant, it will show the 60% of the 60% dominancy. As in case of bryophytes, gametophyte, it will show 60% dominancy, and 40% will be the of sporophyte. So here sporophyte will form is diploid in number, it will form spores, spores they will form gametophyte, gamete will form gametes, male and female gametes. After fertilization they will form zygote, and again there will be the formation of sporophyte. So this will always go on continuing from in a cyclic way, like from sporophyte to gametophyte, from gametophytes to again sporophyte. So this is the alternation of generation with in case of this haplodiploidic life cycle. So examples are very important. So in bryophytes, gametophytic generation is dominant. So you have to keep in mind BGD. Okay, so you can keep in mind BGD, that is in bryophytes gametophytic generation is dominant. Okay, so you can keep in mind B good. Good means GV. Okay, so keep in mind in case of whenever you study alternation of generation. So this is very important topic, and this is the last one bit from the first chapter of 11, that is kingdom planting. So I hope you understood everything very good. Study this video well, watch this, understand, and try to learn it from the NCERT book, because whenever always I used to say you that your NCERT books are only Bibles for you. So thank you so much.